Hi, good afternoon, everyone. As
Good
always,
afternoon, sir.
good afternoon, good afternoon. So, hope all of you are doing all right. So, pretty much the end game today, right? So, in terms of, Acham, before I begin, before I begin, right? So, I think the second quiz is, I think, sometime tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. The syllabus, as you all know, right? It's inventory management, the entire of entirety of inventory management. Uh, Third quiz, possibly sometime next week. We'll talk, as I mentioned earlier, contracts as well as supply chain integration, push, pull, postponements, and stuff like that, right? So that should pretty much take care of it. Now, what we're trying to understand is going forward. No, the agenda for today is to essentially talk about reverse logistics and green supply chains. Now, having said that, I think caveat is in order. Both of these are very complicated, as well as I mean, like most topics in the course, in fact, right? All of them can potentially have a separate course if you want to do dig deeper. So what we'll have today is just a brief flavor of the kind of issues that companies face. We see some examples and also take up for discussion a short case, which is the DHL supply chain case, as I mentioned in the last session, right? So DHL supply chain, and try to model it. In terms of the modeling, what we'll do is the usual, breakout rooms, just submit it. So I've created a short window for its submission because I don't want all of you to spend too much time. There are a lot of other activities also going on. So maybe we'll get a couple of hours. Keep the same groups as in the breakout room, right? And so it's not the usual group activity, right? So think of it as an in-class activity, if you will, and upload it. So anyway, when we come to that, I'll share all those things, right? I'll share all those things. So that is broadly what we want to talk about today. We'll quickly talk about issues related to green supply chain. We'll talk about issues related to reverse logistics. See some examples around that. And that is pretty much it, right? That is pretty much it. Move on to the case then. And in the case, you will find it's quite familiar. It's basically linear programming with a twist, with a small twist, right? So with a small twist. So it kind of, in many senses, we're going to be completing circle. We started with that and we want to be coming back to that, right? So now allow me to jump right in, right? So when we say that, we are talking of reverse logistics, green supply chains, see, world over, this phenomenon of, getting stuff back is becoming more and more prominent, right? It's becoming more and more prominent. And at the same time, if you were to understand that, okay, the size of the market, that is also growing up like anything. Well, it's just going up like anything, right? So there has been a big burst into that. In many ways, COVID has created some additional opportunities. We'll see, some of those possibly. But broadly, across a number of categories, right? Whether it's B2B, B2C, reverse logistics is a big question. Getting the item back, right? Getting the item back. And I'm sure many of you might have returned items bought online, etc., right? So that is broadly what we want to talk about today, right? So for example, issues related to what do you mean by reverse logistics, right? What are the different steps involved? What happens to postponement reverse logistics? And how do you craft a suitable returns policy, right? So we'll try to see some examples around that, right? Some of these numbers are dated, so don't read too much into the numbers. These are just motivating pointers. For example, this is a very misleading number because it's highly category dependent, right? So for the more fashion oriented categories, numbers like 40% are also not unheard of, right? So 40%, I mean, there's a world of difference between 15% and 40%, obviously, right? So that is what we want to talk about today. Basically, as I mentioned, reverse logistics. We'll also want to talk about green supply chain. We also want to talk about some examples around that. And that is pretty much it. That is just a sort of a sensitization in that sense, right? That, this is a fairly complicated model. See, there is a very strategic value to this also, right? So, I mean, of course, the slides, etc., have been uploaded. So, see, if you look at China, for example, right? So, China, for a long time, in fact, as recently as a year or so ago, not year, maybe 2 years or so ago, was a major player in terms of recycling, right? So, but somehow over the last 2 years, the Chinese government has started taking very active steps in order to prevent the stuff from other countries coming to China, right? So which has kind of upended global recycling supply chains, and companies are being asked questions that what do you want to do? So for example, even beer companies getting access to recycled aluminum cans, that was becoming a bit issue, right? In fact, a good resource in case anybody is interested in sustainability strategy, those kind of general readings. So Adam Minter, right? He has written a good account of broadly these things in a book called Junkyard Planet. So this is a pretty good resource, Junkyard Planet, just in case anybody is interested in. themes like this, right? Themes like this. Adam Minter, Junkyard Planet. But I was saying there are some subtle politically nuanced issues also, right? So it's a political issue also. So what you have in front of you is a small example, right? See, rare earth metals, right? Uh, Many of the high-tech applications in both electronics as well as medical imaging, etc. Many times, right? They use rare earth materials, right? But the problem is, China either owns in the sense that it's located within its borders, China, Mongolia, stuff, or it has direct control of that, significant proportion of that. So in that sense, in fact, some of you might remember, right, when Donald Trump and the entire team were trying to send signals to China by trade war, raising tariffs, etc. So rather than releasing a very bombastic statement, what Xi Jinping does is he visits a rare earth factory, right? And the signal is that no, see, we also have something up our sleeve. I mean, we are not without any. No, they also have some arrows in their arsenal, right? So that was the subtle signal Xi Jinping sent. So because of which, what is happening is if you cannot get direct access to those materials, a lot of focus is happening on recycling, right? Again, these are just ideas. See, a lot of ideas get generated. These are just ideas, right? And just see how important this is, right? So recycling program. Imagine a recycling program receiving funding from DoD, the US DoD, I mean, right? So in that sense, there's a lot of strategic value also, right? You cannot just think of reverse logistics as purely as an environmental sustainability. It could be a strategic issue also. And in fact, it is a strategic issue, right? So, and this is the reality of the world. I mean, we have an example in front of us. Trade war happening, we'll do this, we'll do that. What does the Chinese president do? He visits a rare earth factory, leading to all kind of interesting things, right? Leading to all kind of interesting things. So in that sense, no, one has to be a bit careful in terms of mapping and understanding reverse logistics, right? So that's precisely what we'll try to do. We'll try to see some examples about e-commerce. We'll try to see some examples from electronics, of course, not fully in full detail because we simply don't have the time for a deep dive. Yeah, but a basic sensitization, right? So in terms of the dynamics of bringing this stuff full circle, right? If you look, there are a lot of articles in your course pack, right? So please do read them, whenever you get some time, do read them, right? Now, post that, the issue is, okay, the broad steps are mentioned here, right? Acquiring something, getting something, what to do with that, actually doing something, and then putting it back into the system, right? So acquisition, reverse logistics, sorting, recovery, and distribution. So that's one worldview. That's one worldview. There is yet another worldview by somebody who's very famous. So Luke Wassenhoff, right? He is someone who has worked in this field for roughly 25 years or so. So one of the more well-known researchers in the area of reverse logistics. And in this very interesting paper, which part of which is already also shared again in your course pack, right? He fundamentally creates this 6 types of options which are available, right? Starting from direct reuse all the way to scrap. And as you see, this is basically in decreasing order of value recovery, right? In decreasing order. So as you go lower and lower and lower and lower, the value recovery becomes poorer and poorer, right? Value recovery becomes poorer and poorer. So that is why one has to be careful, right, when you are designing those systems. So for example, if you look at it, direct reuse, repair, refurbishing, remanufacturing, cannibalization, and scrap, right? So direct reuse, something as simple as that you got something, right? So for example, you got a stool, for example, right? And somehow you did not like the color, right? So there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that. You say return it back, and the item gets directly circulated back into the supply chain, right? So that becomes a direct reuse. So in that sense, from a utility of the item or the value of the underlying item, this is possibly the highest. A little bit of repair, refurbishing, right? So remanufacturing, cannibalization, and scrap, right? So all of these lead to very different outcomes. Very different outcomes, right? Very different outcomes. I'll sort of come back to this. Allow me to make one more point before I go ahead. See, many of you might remember postponement. We had a very extensive discussion on postponement in the forward supply chain. So what is postponement? Essentially, postponement is you try to delay the value differentiating step as early as possible, right? You try to delay the value differentiating step as late as possible in the forward supply chain. But in the reverse supply chain, what happens is, because there is a very active loss in value, the more you elongate the supply chain, what you tend to do is you try to do something called pre-postponement or disposition, right? So basically the logic is completely inverted, completely. What do I mean by completely? You tried in the reverse supply chain, unlike the forward supply chain, you tend to do the value differentiating step as early as possible. See, because what is happening is, if you do not do that, imagine getting everything back and realizing its value is nil, right? So value differentiating step needs to be done as early as possible. So that is a very classic distinction between the forward and the reverse supply chain. Value differentiation later, in this case, value differentiation as early as possible. And even then, there are a lot of ethical, moral, economic, environmental issues which will crop up. So let's see a couple of examples, and I'll share with you some experiences, right? We'll discuss, what is the implication of all of this pre-postponement, and try to build on that. So I'll tell you two examples. One would be on the role of China, right? And the second would be, where does electronics, Singapore, many of you might share, remember, right? So for example, Times of India has a nice feature, I'll share it with you. So if you get some time, not right now, maybe tomorrow, later on, you can explore this option. So, right. So it's a more of a walk through that entire process, but we are more looking from a process point of view. So allow me to share with you a couple of examples. Let's see what do we make of it, right? So what happens to our electronic waste, and we will see the scale of the problem, and the issue is very humongous. And how do you do all those steps in Wax-Westinghouse paper, right? All of the already mapped out here. So just bear with me. I'll just share it with you. Right. So we'll see a couple of examples around this.
The problem of e-waste is very recent and tricky to nail down.
Unlike probably 10 years back when the producers made products which lasted a little longer, currently the products are made for dump.
So I would request you to notice the process also, right? There are elements of pre-postponement there also.
Right now, if you see, the word which is coined for this is designed for dump. So most companies will make products which are designed for dump so that you can dump it easily and buy new products. So that means there will be more and more electronic waste in the country. And the infrastructure right now is not enough.
India is the largest generator of e-waste in the world. And for many years, the waste has been processed by an ill-equipped army of informal workers, often prone to serious health hazards. But this is very slowly changing. Namo e-waste, founded by Akshay Jain in 2014, is solving the problem bottom up.
The problem with unorganized sector is that they are not aware about the hazards on themselves as well as others. So they do what they do to make money. And these people are the people who are deeply grounded into the.
And see the very disorganized nature of the process also, right?
From door to door and collect it, whereas it is just impossible for a company or an organized sector to go that down into the collection mechanism. Whereas in our model now, we are trying to incorporate them, make them our collection agents. It's always better that they do their job, which they are best at, because they can control the cost there, while us as a company going directly to the public, there will be, of course, more cost that would be involved. So with these people, I see them as an asset in the value chain.
Santosh Yadav, who migrated to Delhi from the neighboring state of Uttar Pradesh, is one such worker. He was an informal recycler earlier, but today has the skills and knowledge to understand the impact of his work.
जैसे ये चीज़ें अगर बाहर पड़ी रहेंगी तो सड़ेंगी, बदबू फैलेगी, क्योंकि पीवीसी में तो वैसे ही बदबू होती है। अगर कहीं कूड़े खत्ते या किसी जगह डाल दिया, माचिस लग गई तो ये टीबी के मरीज बना सकती है। तो इसको अगर संभाल कर हम रख रहे हैं तो वातावरण में फ़र्क आएगा, हम अपना रोज़गार भी पा रहे हैं और मालिक का दो पैसे का फ़ायदा भी हो रहा, और काम भी, धंधा, मजदूर भी आगे बढ़ते जा रहे हैं। क्योंकि वेस्ट इधर उधर फेंकने से तो कोई फ़ायदा है नहीं, जिससे दो पैसा मिल सकता है और वातावरण सही हो जाए, लोगों को परेशानी ना रहे। अगर हर देश में ऐसे किया जाए तो बड़ी अच्छी बात है।
With the help of informal workers who've been brought into the fold, the startup is present in 26 states across the country and processes 70% of all the e-waste generated. Once picked up and brought to the factory, the waste is segregated into repairable and non-repairable assets. The ones that can be repaired are put back into the market at a quarter of its cost, and the non-repairable ones are picked apart and recycled further. Even in formal recycling units, the threat of exposure to toxic chemicals is no less. Obsolete products often contain the most harmful of these.
CRT TVs, not the current ones, LCDs, LEDs, but the old CRT monitors, I think, which we have a lot of quantity here. So these are the ones which contain mercury, and mercury is a highly toxic substance for a human body. Even a slightest exposure of mercury exposes you to the risk of cancer. CFC gases comes out of these large appliances like air conditioners and refrigerators.
So I hope you realize it's in some senses at the bottom of Vasanov's framework, right? That it's basically towards a little bit about scrappage as well as a little bit whatever you're scrounge through. That's pretty much it, right?
We extract those gases and store it properly and then dump it carefully.
The law around e-waste in India, based on a framework used around the world, shifts the burden of waste management to manufacturers. The rationale behind this was that manufacturers would spend less on designing eco-friendly products rather than setting up large waste management units. While theoretically robust, the ground-level implementation of this is very poor.
The e-waste rules came in 2012 for the first time, and then it was revised in 2016. So it's a pretty recent rule. I mean, it's just a couple of years. And unfortunately, though the e-waste infrastructure started coming up way back in 2009, country is not really prepared, because if you look at even the producers who are supposed to be responsible for managing e-waste or collecting e-waste, there's hardly any system that they've set up.
Ensuring strict implementation of the e-waste law might take time, given the burgeoning nature of the problem.
By the way, this is nothing, for those of you who are interested in exploring more in this relatively darker side, right? Just try to find out what used to happen in terms of shipbreaking. Shipbreaking, right? I mean, it's a very completely different world out there. I mean, in India, shipbreaking in India.
In the meantime, it's upon recyclers like Akshay Jain to monitor the floodgates.
इसमें क्या है, कार्ड है? Zinc है खाली, तो खोल क्यों रहे हो? I was called a kabadi wala, and still, if I talk to people, they look at me as a kabadi wala only. But again, if you organize something, there is a potential in everything. That is how I see it.
Right. So, I mean, just to be clear, right, I'm sure many of you would have seen the elements of, for example, cannibalization, right, and the way the process was set up, right? And that is the reality of this, recovery of this part, right? There was not much on the remanufacturing part. There was not much in terms of, for example, direct reuse or refurbishment, right? And see, different companies have their own strategies. There are definitely concerns when you try to return something. A question to ask sometimes is whether it's an end of use, right? Sorry, end of use or end of life. See, because end of life is very different, right? End of life is very different. And end of use is very, end of use by definition means that, possibly maybe a repair or a refurbishment or even a remanufacturing. But generally, end of life would mean that possibly, the likelihood is very high that cannibalization and scrap has to come. And see, these processes have to be mapped. For example, I'm sure many of you would have noticed, right? If you go to a category like apparel or a player like Amazon or a Flipkart, for example, right? What you tend to do is, historically, returns are very high. What you do is you do root cause analysis. Is it because of color? Is it because of fit? Is it because of fabric? Exactly what is the reason? And based on that, you try to devise solutions. So now what you see is you have 5, 10, 15 photographs, right? You also have scale issues. Amazon would also tell you, whether it is as fit as expected or not, right? So a lot of queues are there. See, in any case, last mile logistics is tricky. And then imagine trying to get the item back, right? So there are issues related to inventory, there are issues related to logistics, there are issues related to facility. And all of those issues play out very, very differently in the reverse logistics supply chain, right? Because as we'll see shortly, how do you set up a returns policy is very, very crucial. But before we get into that, allow me to show you a macro view. Of course, cannot go into detail. So we'll have a short illustration of how the Chinese model was working, right? How the Chinese model was working, right? So let's have a look at that. Maybe just jump a little bit. Don't worry too much about the geopolitics into it. Let's
to the World Trade.
Part of it.
This particular notification, though, submitted on July 18th, 2017, managed to send the entire global recycling industry into a tailspin, or possibly even a death spiral. Put simply, this document broke the world's recycling system. But here's how it worked before this document. Let's say a woman in Littleton, Colorado, has yogurt for breakfast. The yogurt is packaged in a thin polypropylene plastic container, and so, once finished, she disposes of it into her recycling bin. This is then picked up by a recycling truck a few days later and brought here to the local recycling company's materials recovery facility. There, this yogurt container, along with all the rest of the single-stream recycling picked up that day, is dumped out and placed into this semi-automated sorting system. Some products are simple to isolate. Most metals, for example, can be picked up by magnets, while paper and cardboard can be easily sorted by density, as they're typically lighter than other recyclables. Glass, plastics, and non-magnetic metals are a little more difficult to sort, but each looks quite distinct, so optical scanners operate blowers or other diversion tools that are able to sort these out. With a few more steps, the facility is more or less left with just plastic, but that's where things get difficult. Plastic comes in all sorts.
For those of you who have seen Wall-E, right, kind of reminds of scenes of that, right? But yeah, China's scale was humongous, right? Humongous. So,
of shapes, sizes, and types, and different shapes, sizes, or types of plastic are recycled in different ways. Optical sensors start out by at least accomplishing a high-level sort, though. For example, in many US states, plastic bottles are sold with a 5 or 10 cent deposit, meaning that recycling companies put a lot of effort into recovering those from the mix, as they can be sold for, at least relative to the other plastics, a lot. They also put a lot of work into recovering certain plastic types, such as high-density polyethylene, as this both sells for more and is easier to sort out of the mix since it's typically used to make larger items like plastic crates, shampoo bottles, and other products where sturdiness matters. The polyethylene and other higher-value plastics are quite accurately sorted and then melted down into bulk raw plastic, which is resold to manufacturers. Certain other plastics, though, have a negative value. They can't be sold, and in fact, it would take so much work to turn them into usable raw material that recycling companies would have to pay someone to take it off their hands. Typically falling into this category are smaller items like bottle caps, plastic bags, and other scraps below 3 inches or 8 centimeters in width that just can't be easily sorted by automated systems. These are then aggregated together and, at best, used to generate electricity through incineration, or, at worst, are just sent to a landfill. So, to summarize, there's high-value plastic that's recovered immediately, negative-value plastic that's either incinerated or sent to a landfill, and then there's a third category in between those two, and that's where things get interesting. Anything that isn't small and unrecoverable or large and valuable is typically mixed together and formed into big bales of unsorted, medium-size, medium-value plastic that effectively have a neutral value on the free market. The raw materials in these bales, known as MRF residuals, is not quite valuable enough to pay for the sorting process they would need for recycling, which leads to their neutral value, at least in the US. After it takes its trip through the materials recovery facility, that yogurt container from Littleton, Colorado would, if properly sorted, end up in one of these MRF residual bales. These are then loaded into the back of a semi-truck driven 1,000 miles to the port of Long Beach, California. There, the bales are officially exported from the US, loaded into a shipping container, and placed on an enormous yet empty Hong Kong-bound cargo ship. Now, with this knowledge, some might ask a question. How on earth did we end up with this system, theoretically designed to reduce our impact on the world, where our waste is shipped across the world? To that, there's actually a surprisingly specific answer. Decades ago, in 1969, the first national conference on packaging.
Right. So anyway, so the point is, I'll just maybe possibly share this link for the injustice case anyone is interested. Allow me to sort of move forward because we have to discuss 2-3 very important things. See, the way you strategize is very, very different, right? The way you strategize is very, very different because it has to be linked to the root cause. If you are not doing that, it's an issue, right? Because then you cannot devise a strategy. Let me share you a couple examples, right? Say for example, a few years back, I don't know what's the process now. I had to return. I mean, not return. It was in under warranty, so I had to return my Western Digital hard disk, right? So they apparently gave me 3 options, if I remember the whole process correctly. One option was, FedEx could have somebody, some of the courier companies could have come and picked it up, but I think that service was not available here at the institute. So another option was, because I was staying in the city, so they said, you can go to our city delivery, drop-off point and drop it there. So it was pretty smooth that way. Just take a printout, strip it, put it there, and just drop it off. That's it, right? And the entire process was taken care of. So pretty smooth, but that's nothing compared to many of the other players in B2C, B2C space do. They come to your house, go back, collect it, and stuff gets taken, right? But root cause analysis is important. Allow me to show you another example with data, right? So this is about returns, e-commerce in general, at Amazon in particular. Again, we will not be able to see the full picture because it's fairly detailed, right? So
returns are a major headache for customers, and they drain
there's
companies
some
of
data
millions of dollars in
stored here,
unwanted
so I just
inventory
want
and
to
extra
come to
labor.
that.
Returns create billions of pounds of waste and entire walls of shame in warehouses around the world. But Amazon is trying to change all of that.
Where Amazon absolutely leads is in trying to be the easiest, lowest friction return experience for the consumer, and thereby win customer loyalty and increase customer purchases while they tackle some of these other big institutional infrastructure problems around returns.
From robots to in-person returns, the world's most valuable company is redefining the returns process. And as e-commerce grows, smaller companies are finding ways to make money off returns. We wanted to find out, how does Amazon process returns, and what's the company doing to protect the environment and its bottom line?
Returns are by far the largest challenge to e-commerce, and I think to commerce in general for both retailers and manufacturers.
As more consumer spending is shifting from in-store to online, it's really just exacerbating the size of the returns problem that we all have to deal with. Across the entire Amazon marketplace, they now sell over 800 million products. So this is a scale that the world has never had to deal with before.
There's even an annual conference devoted entirely to solving the problem created by returns. Namely, inefficient reverse logistics is a huge loss for companies.
In a traditional brick and mortar store, we might have average return rates of 8 to 10%, but in e-commerce, it's totally common to see 20 or 30% of all purchases get returned.
Forrester Research estimates that e-commerce will see $207 billion worth of returns this year.
Amazon is about half of all e-commerce, so slightly more than $100 billion in returns happen in North America just with Amazon. So that's a huge expense.
And the returns process matters to customers. According to data compiled by Invesp, 79% of consumers want free return shipping, and 67% check the returns page before making an online purchase. All this has led to the current trend of free return shipping, which is now offered by almost half of retailers.
Where the challenge is can you do it in a way where the unit economics don't kill you? The difference with Amazon is they have the scale and they've trained their investors to accept that in the beginning they may do things at a loss. What that gives them the flexibility to do then is to invent. They bring a lot of talent to the table and they figure out how to optimize and create efficiencies that will allow them to have the unit economics work to their favor and ultimately get those margins back.
The complicated reverse logistics journey starts when you decide to return an item. Amazon gives you 30 days from the day you receive an item to bring it back or put it in the mail.
Generally you get 30 days and generally they give your money back and even include paying for shipping both ways, right? Which has inspired other companies to have to follow suit.
And with every return, Amazon wants to know why.
See some interesting data here,
the
right?
size, fit, or color was wrong. 21.
Right. So see, this is important, right? I mean, it's of course, this is from a small sample in a very specific location. But broadly, if we take this to be true, right, there are some interesting things. Size, fit, or color was wrong, right? These seem to be the major driver. And I hope you realize, because see, returns are a double whammy, right? Not only do you have to get the item back and the initial spending is also lost. And of course, returns, how do you process all those questions are there. But 34% because, remember, 1/3 of the headache. And remember, it's hundreds of billions of dollars worth of opportunity, right? 1/3 of the headache is being generated because size, fit, or color was wrong, right? So in some senses, that's a penalty for virtualization. In some senses, I mean, you might say that's too strong a word, but because in a virtual world, it becomes difficult to map. So what many of these companies, each with a different business model, is trying to do is trying to understand this. So you might have a Stitch Fix. Some of you might remember, right? First year we talked a little bit about Stitch Fix. What a Stitch Fix does is it gives you options, and when you return, it updates its algorithm about you, which colors, which sizes, which fits, which designs, which prints are you returning, so that when we send you the next subscription box, the returns would be lower. Somebody else tried to create it as a problem at source, right? Some of them allow you to watch videos nowadays, right? So that you get a better feel, right? Some of them give you data about return, about the overall feedback about does it fit as expected, right? So all those things are being done. And the beauty of the return policy is you can actually tweak the return policy depending on this, right? And we will see, what does the return policy means, right? So Rahul, please go ahead.
E-commerce, the return actually paid by the sellers only, right? So then the online players will have no incentive to reduce the returns, Like for example, if the returns is completely paid by the sellers, then they don't have an incentive. For example, if it is an offline store, if there is a return, I have to pay for the order processing of returns.
True. See, very fair point, I think, and a very important point. But remember two things. One is, if you look at a transaction level, right? Frequently, I'm sure many of you might have got notification the seller had agreed to process the returns. Number one, right? Number one. But there are multiple points here. Number two. I mean, even if you take that logic on its face value, there are a lot of things which Amazon are trying to do as a private label basis, right? Of course, you might say, the contracts can be formed, etc. But private label is number two. Number three, if Amazon is not doing anything to reduce returns, would it not reduce the propensity of suppliers to list on Amazon? And remember, this is a company which is thriving on choice. So that becomes a competitive weapon against them. That, they are not doing anything to reduce returns, and I am, right? So again, you cannot stay still because the problem is cutthroat. People would list with you if you are willing to help them out. And in fact, they had some amazing schemes. They had the Tatkal scheme, by the way. It was developed in India and taken worldwide. That's what I remember reading, right? So you go, by the time you have a cup of tea, Amazon would have listed you on the portal, right? So I mean, that was the kind of scheme which they had. I'm sure they might still have it, but I have no idea, right? So again, it's a big pull to lure the suppliers in because they are a key part of generating business for you. So in that sense, you need to be able to justify that's what I'm trying to do. And that's why they're trying to craft those features, like better and better quality photographs, multiple angles, right? They scale it also. Sometimes they also share about them. For example, if there is a model who's involved, so they would say that, he or she is, let's say height is 5 foot 10 inches, 6 foot 2 inches, etc. Just to give you a better sense. All of this is driving lower returns because if you do not do anything, it opens the pathways up for other players. So in that sense, it's a multifaceted problem. It's a very, very multifaceted problem, right? So maybe a quick, completion of this, then we'll move ahead.
21% say the item was damaged, broken, or no longer functional. 14% say the item wasn't as described. 10% simply didn't like it, and 9% changed their minds.
Amazon sees on their scoring.
And the most amazing part, see, that's why you just love the world. Just look at the last point, intended to return when purchased. So again, at some level, it's a policy failure also, right? That you purchased it because you wanted to return it. So the world is a bit weird that way, right? That you just intended to return it when you purchased it. What can I say, right? World is a funny place. World is a funny place, right? Yeah. So allow me to sort of quickly stop this part here because we have to discuss a few other points also, right? So this is, remember, this is the Amazon worldview, which is not the complete story, by the way, right? Because see, one is returns being there. The next question which comes in the life cycle of the returns is what do you do once the returns come back in? So in this context, right, what a company in Canada, what they did was they went ahead, right? They went ahead and they said, okay, we'll buy some products, right? They bought some products, got the items back, got the items and returned it after placing some trackers just to understand what really happens. And it makes for fascinating viewing. So let me show you that example, then I'll come back and complete the points which I was about to make, right? So let me show you one last, again, a small snippet. Of course, I cannot, because of paucity of time, we cannot have a look at the full details. But allow me to show you a small snippet once more, right? Let's see. So as I said, the setup is they have purchased something. Now they're about to return it with trackers involved, and then we'll try to map the process, right? So without company involvement, without direct company involvement. So let's see.
We sent back.
That looks good. That looks good, right?
We follow them to this facility and learn truckloads of Amazon returns end up here to be recycled or destroyed.
We do product destruction.
But unlike all those truckloads of returns, our overalls keep moving and the tracker shoots us a signal from the road. Since we sent them back to Amazon, the overalls make 5 stops and travel over 200 kilometers to get here. See anything there?
You can't really see anything through here.
All right, let me take a look over the door. Well, it's kind of like a warehouse. There's all sorts of Phillips head shavers. There's just boxes and boxes of all sorts of things. It almost looks like a liquidator. Turns out a lot of online returns, including Amazon's, end up at liquidators. Roy.
David, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. So, I got 3 pallets in here. You willing to take a look at it for me?
I'll take a look.
Yeah, you got a little more experience at it. Roy Dernbeck.
It's just weird, right? You are selling items without any categorization. Of course, the scale of the problem is immense, right? So, you cannot really blame in that sense, right? But the scale, even if you are selling it by trailers, you're selling it by, pallets full of items. You come big, and of course, in many senses, it's a different kind of country, right? Some of you might be fan of stand-up specials, right? Comedy stand-ups. Ronnie Cheng, Netflix. I don't know how many of you were able to watch it, but he makes some interesting, observations. Very, very stinging commentary, on America, right? So anyway, only for those of you interested in stand-up comedy, right? Let's see.
In the liquidation business for over 25 years, with several stores across the country.
Why don't we put these 3 out here?
Okay.
And we'll see what you got.
All right, let's do it. Remember, those pallets of Amazon returns we bought from a liquidator? We're about to find out what they're really worth.
They put the best stuff on the outside. So any good big brand names like Weber or whatever, the good stuff's gonna be all on the outside.
Yeah.
And you start digging in the middle, that's where you're gonna throw in the rest of the junk.
When you see this right now, what do you think?
This is returns. This is garbage. This is stuff companies, especially these online companies, they can't keep up with the returns. So they just find fast ways to sell it by the skid, the truckload, trailer load, whatever.
You seeing more of this?
Trailers and trailers every day.
Okay, let's crack it open, see what we got.
Let's see what you got.
We've got 2 piles going. Things you can sell again, and things you would lose or toss out.
To use food product, I would get rid of it. for.
Okay, what about this?
Toys are always easy to sell. It says defective, then just throw it out, because now we already know it doesn't work.
Foldable burlap storage cubes.
Storage cubes, everybody's always trying to organize. Here, we got a guitar, man. Let's see what kind of guitar we got.
Strings are broken, and so is the guitar.
Roy shows us that at least a third of these Amazon returns that ended up in liquidation, he thinks, would probably be tossed in the garbage.
When you think about the volume of stuff you've seen over your career, like a lot of this stuff comes from Amazon. It's returns from Amazon.
Yeah.
How much is that just ending up in the dumpster?
I'm scared to think about how much stuff is going back to the landfills, because it's endless amounts of this stuff every day.
You're actually trying to filter some of it and give it a new life.
I do. I try not to send it to landfill. If it's something that's got some value, I can save somebody some money, I'll try and resell it.
But can you save everything?
No, obviously. Look how much trash we got out of your 3 skids.
All this trash shows that even returns Amazon sends to liquidation for a new life can end up as garbage. While there are no Canadian stats, American experts estimate 5 billion pounds of returns from all retailers end up in US landfills every year.
Right, so again, see, it's a weird world, right? You just look at the way the returns were being treated. I mean, it's not just Canada, for example. The point is, what is happening is the scale is so big, right? It becomes difficult for you to manage. And some interesting observations, right, on which categories sell, right? For example, toys being an interesting choice, right? Toys being an interesting choice in terms of the ability to you use them once more, multiple times, get realizations which are different. So again, the point is, okay, all of this is carrying out. What do you do? And remember, pre-postponement or product dispositioning is important part of it. But when the scale becomes too much, so basically you just kind of give up on the problem. You take it, you handle your headache, right? You take it, you handle your headache. So which brings me to an interesting point about this entire exercise, right? See, when we talk of return policies, right? Many companies are trying to bring returns in very different ways. Here is an example of IKEA, for example, right? IKEA used furnitures in their own supply chain, right? And remember, it's a massive opportunity and generally the volumes are higher. Just look at, we have some data about what kind of contracts are being put in place, right? So you log into the system, you get an estimate about its value, right? Very new items, 50%. Minor scratches, 40%. Well used, 30%, right? So remember, as new 50%, right? It's a pretty big downgrade from what it's being offered, right? And they're trying to run experiments around that, right? And anything which cannot be resold will be recycled, right? So you name a company, and across the globe, you'll find that returns are either being co-opted in the main supply chain, because then it becomes a problem, right? Because something as simple as repairability. So for example, Apple is notorious for making its products highly non-repairable by the customers. There's a movement called right to repair, right? Right to repair. So if you have purchased something, I should have a right to repair it in the Western world. I mean, I don't know. Might be there in the Eastern world also. I have not read about it. The causes of their ire range from iPhone manufacturing to as well as tractor manufacturing, because systems are being made so complicated. Some of you might remember, right? At one point of time, batteries used to be a nice small contraption. You take out one battery, put another battery, continue with the phone. But now, I think the phone makers are actively going out of their way to ensure that you cannot look at the battery of the phone, right? And gluing things, etc. So all of those things essentially, reduce the repairability of the product. So repairability, returns, value estimation, all of these kind of go hand to hand. Let me show you one more example from practice, and hopefully not a video. I mean, it's more of an illustration. See how this thing works is the following. Oh, sorry, not this. A long time back, right? Whenever you wanted to return some stuff, right? So Cashify was one of those players. It used to be called Reglobe, if I'm not mistaken. So Amazon was partnering with Cashify. I don't know whom they are partnering with now. I have no idea. Right? Not tried to find out, to be honest. But I'll just show you know how this process works. So imagine you want, remember, just keep product pre-postponement in your mind, right? Pre-postponement. So imagine you want to, let's say, sell your phone, let's say, right? Sell your phone. So, you know, for example, let's say it's a Samsung. I'm just giving some example, right? Samsung, right? So then what happens is you just go on such as Galaxy, okay, Galaxy C series, J series, Note series, that's it, right? You try to find out, okay, see, so for example, let's say it's a Galaxy M30, let's say, for example, right? So this initially gives you that, you know, what kind of variant do you have, right? So for example, I have the 64 GB, right? So it gives me some estimate, right? It gives me some estimate, right? Get exact. Now see the pre-postponement starts, right? If you want to get exact value, right? So it starts calculating, right? It starts putting things into place, right? So can you make calls? Yes, or you know, no, continue, right? So are there some options which are not processing? For example, power button is not working, right? Continue. Original charger box with AMI. Suppose you don't have any of the following, right? So it keeps on asking you a lot of options till, and of course, I'm not going to give my number. I don't want to receive calls, right? I don't want to send any of my mobile phones. But the point is, you get a lot more crunchier data about what you have, right? And they allow you, it kind of allows you to make a much more detailed estimate in terms of what kind of revenues are you looking for, right? So that is the beauty of this whole pre-postponement, the way it plays out, right? So again, one has to be careful. One has to be very, very careful when we're dealing with this. And then it's a good resource if you want to get a benchmark whether in a return in an exchange, you know, with Amazon or Flipkart, are you getting a decent policy or not? Of course, they are pan-India, their reach is limited. So all those questions are also there. Now, one last point before we get into the case is about the design of policy of returns, right? So a lot of interesting research has been done, right? So this is an extract from an academic paper using empirical data. Right. So what they found was that when we say that you let us design a returns policy, it's actually contingent on 5 fundamental pillars. Right. So what are those 5 fundamental pillars? Time, monetary, effort, scope, and exchange. Time, monetary, effort, scope, and exchange. Right. So let's try to take them one by one. See, time leniency. What would be the window of return? 7 days, 14 days, 30 days. I'm sure many of you would have noticed that, you know, different companies, depending on what you buy. So for example, for some of the electronics items, the return window is 7 days. For some of the toys, sometimes the return window is 30 days, right? So it depends, right? Exactly what are you talking about, right? I mean, for example, if you try to buy a Wakefit mattress, right? So Wakefit says we are happy to return it within after 100 days of use also, right? So that is their brand promise. So again, it depends, right? So time leniency, number one. The second is monetary leniency, right? So is it the entirety which is being refunded, or is there some transaction charges being put in place, if I may, right? Transaction charges. Effort leniency is that whole Western digital thing which I was talking about, right? So do I have to give some documents? Do I have to have the original bill, original charger, original box? Do I need to go? Somebody will come and collect? Will the window be broad, or do I have to stay back? So all of that comes under effort leniency, right? The next is scope leniency. All the items. So for example, sometimes when you buy an item at discount, right, it might not be returnable, right? Sometimes, you know, for some categories of garments are not returnable, right? Some categories of, you know, baby products are also non-returnable because of health, hygiene, economics, whatever is the underlying reason, right? So that is the broad definition of scope leniency. And the last is exchange leniency. Is it goods exchange, cash, or store credit? See, because different people might have different preference, right? So these are the 5 broad pillars, and the interesting dynamic. See, what is the trade-off in these 5 pillars? See, returns policy is a very, very useful term, you know, useful lever in terms of getting people to buy, to try, right? To buy or try. So in that sense, sales, if you want to increase, this is a useful tool. But as the sales increase, right, and if you have too lenient a policy, you end up, you know, incurring a lot of returns also, right? So if you try to compress returns, sales might also be reduced. So company at a policy level, what you're trying to do is you're always trying to understand that how do I come up with a balance which ensures that we are able to do a decent job in terms of managing this entire process, right? So for example, if we reduce the time leniency but maintain exchange leniency, is that better, right? Or for example, you want to increase the time leniency, right? But change the exchange leniency. Effort leniency is one of the more easier things, right? आपको जाके I mean, I don't know whether anybody has tried to return some of the companies. So what they do is, for example, a company like Boat, right? What they do is, if there's a problem, you have to first try to reach their number or email them, right? Which may or may not be accessible, right? May or may not be accessible. So in that sense, that ease of the process is not there at all, right? So effort leniency, then you have to get a box, you have to pack it, and you have to dispatch it. Of course, some of them are directly linked to the scale of operations. Not every company can have a very extensive returns operations, right? Of course, there are third-party service providers who can help you with that, but again, there will be a transaction fee. So all of these are very crucial examples. Sorry, very crucial issues. And companies worldwide, not just in India, worldwide are struggling to make sense of this, right? And you can tinker with any of this monetary leniency. So I mean, it's a different case, but in exchange, right? In mobile exchange on for example, Amazon or Flipkart during a sale, sometimes they charge 100 rupees as the processing fee, handling fee, whatever they want to call it, right? So again, that's definitely there. So which parameter to tinker with, right? Which parameter? Think of it yourself individually, right? If I am trying to come up with a new site, I want this, I want this, I want this, and I might be slightly, I don't think any buying one step, so I'm not worried about this, but I'm more worried about this because I don't want to buy more from you. So an Amazon store credit might be okay because I make repeat purchases, but a Pepperfry, I mean, not exactly contracts, might not be because I'm not looking forward for multiple engagements. So again, what you offer, what you not offer, all of these are interesting choices. And like whenever you're trying to design a return policy, all these questions have to be clear. Is there a universal policy? No, right? So for example, electronics, by their short duration, you do not want people to keep it for 1 month and then return. Either you like it or you don't like it, send it back immediately. That is it. Because the decay in value is immense, right? Product dispositioning, the decay in value is immense. So if you are trying to design a policy, it is better that you design it in such a way that all these trade-offs are clear. And that is why companies with change in their life cycle, right? Initially, when you are, a lot of it is loose. As you become more and more scaled, more and more well established, many of these potential loose policies become very tight, very tight, right? So again, that's the reality of setting up a variety of these policies, right? So now, what is the agenda going forward? The agenda going forward is to take up a short case. It's about DHL, right? So what I'm going to do is possibly I will just share the case with you. Just give me a second, right? I'll just share it with you. Chat box, right? So maybe I'll just share it using the chat box. Just give me 1 second, please. Yeah, so this is a copy of the case which I've just sent, and I'll also send the associated Excel file. Just give me 1 second. Right. So what I would request everyone is to maybe quickly download this. Let's have a quick break early so that we get more time to work on the case. Right. So once we come back from this rather early break, right, we'll move on to that. I'll brief you initially. So it's 55. So maybe 4:10 we are back, right? Around 4:10. I'll brief you on the case, and that will be an in-class exercise, right? In-class exercise, which with a submission. Okay, so let's have a break, 15 minutes. Once we are back, we'll move on to the case, right? So roughly 15 minutes, we'll be back. Move on to the case. Right. So I think we're good to go, right? Lying on time? Yes. So before we get into breakout rooms and all that stuff, allow me to sort of quickly brief you on the case, right? See, the case is relatively straightforward. Just a couple of key points. So the case is about a company, right? And what they're trying to understand is, right, talking about a client, and think of it as, for example, Oneida, for example, right? And what they're trying to understand is that there are potential suppliers, ODMs, right, in the Chinese market. And overall, they are looking at a total of 7 ODMs, right? 7 ODMs. 7, right? So as you can see, ODM 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'll just tell you the setup, right? So just if I take it one by one, the total demand that they are looking to satisfy, the company, original company, right? Your Oneida or your Vodafone, or your Videocon or your Samsung, whatever be the nature of the company. So this, they are trying to talk about 2 different SKUs, 42-inch LCD and a 32-inch LCD, right? 42-inch and 32-inch, right? And within this setup, 920,000 is the demand for the 42-inch, and 530,000 is the demand for the 32-inch, right? 42-inch, 32-inch. Make sense? Now, what happens is, in addition to the economic component, right, which I'll just come to, there's an environmental component also. So in just the second table, as you can see, right, data is given for CO2 emission in kg per ton kilometer. So 10 kilometer would mean, per ton kilometer would mean weight and distance combo. Weight and distance combo, right? So we are given weight of both the televisions, and we are given the demands, and there would be distances also, right? As you can see, right, third row में distance to DC in kilometers. So distance भी दिया है, weight भी दिया है, and demand भी दिया, right? So that way, the moment you try to take any of these options, regular air express, road, there is a per unit CO2 emission component, per unit CO2 emission component, right? So broadly, we want to minimize it. Number one, the objective is to minimize emissions costs, right? Emission impact, sorry, subject to meeting a budgetary constraint of 3 billion yen, right? 3 billion yen. And then there are some production constraints also. What are the production constraints? I just draw your attention towards the bottom. So there is a, if you decide an ODM, if you decide to go with an ODM, the minimum commitment with an ODM is 200,000 units. If you go with that ODM, right? The maximum commitment with an ODM, right, is 600,000 units. If you choose, should you choose to go with that ODM, right? So those are production constraints because of scale and MOQ issues, right? Then there are some transportation and shipping constraints. What are these? If there are multiple modes, because of risk, because of responsiveness, because of cost efficiency, there are some additional constraints, essentially, that there is a threshold of minimum units to be shipped by different options: regular air express, road, president truckload, road network, rail, etc., 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 right? For both 42-inch and 32-inch. So for example, the minimum number of 42-inch LCD televisions to be shipped by rail is 138,000, and the corresponding number for 32-inch LCD televisions is 79,500, right? So that is the broad setup of the problem. Minimize constraints, subject to these production and shipping constraints, and subject to a budgetary constraint also of 3 billion Chinese yen, right? Chinese renminbi. So these are the 3 objective: minimize emissions, right? Objective, minimize emissions, constraints, budgetary, production, shipping, right? 3. In terms of the layout, what we'll do is we'll get into different breakout rooms. Once you get into the breakout rooms, I'll keep on sending some pointers, or maybe joining into different breakout rooms like usual, right? Depending on, if you have any problem, you always have the option of coming back and pinging me, right? So that I can guide you. But once you get into the breakout room, please ensure that all of you who are working on this put your name in the Excel file. The deadline for submission is already set. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's, I think, 7:15 today, right? So that's just to give you some time if you want to maybe touch. I'm not interested in the answer, just the approach, just the approach. I mean, I could not care less that whether you get the answer exactly correct or not. That's not really the point of the exercise. It's just a modeling approach, right? So please ensure all your names and roll numbers are put in possibly a separate tab of the Excel file, right? Otherwise, I won't be able to do it at a later point in time because it's impossible to know to locate who submitted what, right? So it's not possible to do that. So please ensure wherever you are. And in terms of joining, right? If joining anybody faces an issues, you can always connect back, right? But if you drop off because you're not here, I mean, I won't be able to help you out, right? So that is pretty much the template. I would just create the breakout rooms, maybe roughly 50 minutes or so, right? So that should give you more than sufficient time. This is nothing but a problem which you have done 100 times with the added twist of environmental constraints. And after we come back from the breakout rooms, I would show you that this how does sensitivity analysis helps us massively in problems like these. So that is the broad agenda. In some senses, closing the circle, ending with what we started, right? So just give me a second. I hope every one of you has the Excel file as well as the the case. If not, I mean, just for the benefit in case somebody was facing any issues, I'll upload both of these once more, right? So this is the case, just going through, right? And the corresponding Excel file is also being set, right? So A1, right? So I hope you got it. Okay. So let me create the breakout rooms. Just give me a second, right? All right. So just give me a second. Right. So should be getting notifications now. Do it and we are golden.
So,
yes, please.
Can you tell again the emission metric?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just come to your room and help you out. Is that all right, Rahul?
Sure, sir.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, I'm so sorry. I just realized my name is my friend's name. We joined from the same device, so that's why I didn't check it. So can I drop off the call, change my name, and join in again?
Yeah, sure. No problem. Absolutely.
And then you can send me to breakout room.
Yeah. Perfect. Please do. Please, absolutely no issue.
Sure, sir.
Right. Anybody facing any problem in joining can always feel free to sort of drop off and log in, right? Or sometimes people get stuck, so I just sort of remove them and they rejoin. So it's absolutely fine. Nothing to worry. Right. So.
Sir, we are not able to share our screens.
Yeah, my bad. No, thanks. So, great.
So can you please add me to breakout room?
Yeah, we'll do. Just give me 1 second. You should be getting the notification now.
Thank you. Sir, I'm getting for breakout room 8.
Yeah, perfect. Please go.
That's fine.
Sir, can you add me to breakout room 2?
Who am I supposed to add?
Sharon.
Sharon, just give me 1 second. Oh, it's showing you not joined. Okay, seems to be a bit of an issue. Okay. Move to breakout. Is it alright if I try to move you to another room because breakout room of 2 option is not there? I'll just try to move you to another room. All right.
Okay.
Shipra, Shruti, Shikha, and Weber, right? Any problems in joining? Vikas, did you drop off or something? Shipra, you are facing any problem? Yeah, Abhishek, where were you?
Yes, sir.
कहाँ रह गए थे? Got caught up in something, it seems, huh? Okay, nothing to worry. Let me do one thing. I'll just put you in one of the breakout rooms. Ensure that they put your name is there in the submission, because without that we can't help you, right? Okay.
Hello, sir. Sir, actually, I dropped off call. I don't know how.
Sorry?
I dropped off call.
No, no, you did not drop off. You're not here for a long time, right? What happened? Where were you?
I was
Which
there.
which breakout room?
I was in breakout room 10.
Okay, okay. Just give me a second, right? Assign people. Uh, so, Saran, just give me a second, right? I'll put you into there. 7, right? Sure. Saranj, I hope you would have received the notification, right? We'll just wait for everyone to join, right? So I think people are just joining back. Huh? Great. So I think pretty much everyone is back. See, the problem, as I said before, is pretty straightforward, right? There's nothing much in there modeling wise. There are a couple of things I thought highlighting. One, purely from a modeling perspective, for those of you, remember, see, the objective is to minimize the emissions, right? So what would be the emissions? Emissions would be how much you are sending, right? The objectives, sorry, the decision variables, and the emission matrix which you already have, right? Remember that was ton kilometer, right? So how much is the quantity, right, into the distance? So that is already captured for us, right? That is already captured for us. So once you do that, the objective becomes minimization of emission, right? And in terms of constraints, as you can see, there are some shipment constraints, right? Mode choice of mode, right? Then there are some demand constraints. The demand should be met, and then there are some production constraints also, right? That you cannot have have to have minimum of this much or maximum of this much. So the logic is pretty straightforward, right? If you try to model it directly, as I was mentioning in the broadcast, the problem was that if you try to model it directly, then everybody would be forced to create a minimum of 200,000, which does not make any sense. So the logic, the correct way to do it could be that you map it to a binary variable, and the binary variable will take a value of 1. So the moment you select something, it has to be at least greater than 200,000 and less than 600,000. And if it is not selected, the binary variable would take a value of 0, and it will solve it. Right. So I think that way it's pretty straightforward. And the interesting thing is the what if analysis I wanted to highlight, right? So allow me to just give me a second, right? So you solve this, you get some answer subject to a budgetary constraint of 3 billion yen, you get this value, right? So just look at this, what I'm going to do, right? That is the power of what I'm going to do is, just for the sake of argumentation, as a basic scenario analysis, I'm going to increase the budget for this entire exercise by 10%, right? 10%. Let's see what comes out of it. Right, I just solve it. They're not changing anything at all. I'm not changing anything at all, right? Can you see what is happening to the value? Right? With a 10% increase in budget, the emission footprint is coming down by 50%. Of course, it's not a universal law, right? It will depend on the values. But what I'm trying to highlight is the importance of scenario analysis becomes all the more crucial, especially at a supply chain level when you are trying to justify multiple objectives, whether it's efficiency, whether it's responsiveness, whether it's emissions, whether it's about inclusivity. The importance of scenario analysis becomes all the more crucial. And remember, it's not as if that this will continue. Let me now try to improve it even further, right? So for example, if I make it 45, right? So let's see what comes out of it. So I'll just put the values. Right, I hope you can see it's not getting affected at all, right? So in that sense, we are looking for this point of optimality beyond which it is not getting affected at all, right? So again, what I'm trying to highlight here is that a small increase, a small change in some of the parameters might have an outsized impact, right? Might have an outsized impact on how the system needs to perform, right? How the system needs to perform. So any and all such options need to be on the table. Any and all such options need to be on the table. And modeling wise, it's not tricky. I cannot emphasize this enough, right? What if analysis is the single most powerful driver of efficiencies, because a lot of modeling is based on assumptions, estimates, right? And to test the robustness of those assumptions, the validity of those estimates, we need to do what if analysis. In this simple case, it's a pretty straightforward, it's an abstraction of a real life case, but yeah. In this case, a 10% budgetary increase leads to a 50% reduction in carbon emission. And chances are, many companies might end up taking that, right? So that is why one has to be careful. Modeling wise, there is nothing new. All of you are experts in these kind of modeling, so I don't need to spend too much time there. But the larger point is, supply chain is fundamentally a game of incentives, like much of management, right? Like much of management. And in that sense, we need to figure out what are the correct incentives, whether it's to facilitate information sharing, whether it's to facilitate risk sharing, whether it's to facilitate technology adoption, whether it's to facilitate outsourcing. The broad structures need to be understood at a macro level. And once you get into the world, like all disciplines in the world, right, there is just so much to learn, right? So I understand this was not easy for all of you, especially with the Zoom platform. Many times, not being able to sit in a classroom. I mean, the sheer the effect which it has, right? I mean, we cannot discount that. But all of you were very, very patient listeners, asking some very, very interesting questions. And some of you, if you feel that somehow supply chain, it's not that, so blame it on me. The subject is amazing, right? The subject is absolutely amazing, right? It is just so much to learn in supply chain, right? So it's on me, right? If I have not been able to motivate you to study it more, because there's just so much, right? I mean, whatever you read about, it has a chunk supply chain component. If you're interested in electric vehicles, I shared a couple of articles in the break, right? Rivian, what is happening with Rivian? Supply chain. Why is Volkswagen faltering with its multi-billion-dollar pound bet? Again, it has got to do with supply chain, right? And how will it come out of that for us? Again, supply chain. So you name it a phenomenon, right? So 2020s, 2030s going forward is all about going to be much of it. I mean, it's going to be about operations supply chain, right? And I'm sure all of you would be, doing a lot of interesting stuff around those things. As always, right? I'm always welcome. I'm not very good at remembering names, so just in case you reach out to me, please don't mind if you just have to send one quick reminder about what it is all about, right? So I hope that was all right. Exam pretty straightforward, a mix of conceptual, a mix of analytical. I was planning to do it on metal, but in the first section, some people were very apprehensive of the qualities of metal. So I did not. I mean, I did not promise to them. I will not promise to you. I will not promise to the third section also that it will not be on metal. But I'll again get in touch with PGP office. I've never done an exam on metal, right? So I'll get in touch with them, see if the problems can be resolved, and then take a call, right? Again, if it happens on metal, blame me. I mean, there are always other considerations also, right? How do you allow people to use this, use that, etc. In an ideal world, I would have loved to give you a take-home exam. See, exams are not a tricky thing. You can set it as easy as you want. You can set it as tough as you want. But exams, marks, the correlation with knowledge is very low. So I'm not a big believer, but that's a philosophical discussion. Let me not get into that. But my point is, I'll try. Some of you might also have a similar concern. So maybe I'll get in touch with the PGP office. That take-home option is not available for this term, right? So I'll try to take a call once I have a discussion once more, right? In case anybody has any question, I'm happy to take that. By the way, at any point of time, feel free to come with a question, any concern. I would be happy to help in any way I can. Supply chain, non-supply chain, any other issue at all, right? So feel free to know. If you're in campus, drop by. We'll have a cup of tea, socially distanced cup of tea. And let's see what comes out of it, right? Anybody has any questions, feel free. Otherwise, adios, right? That's pretty much from us. It's always a pleasure. And feel free, do stay in touch. It has been a tough year for all of us, right? But is it open book then only? Yeah, Shivam, so those are the issues that we need to consider, right? As I said, right? I mean, there is always a trade-off, just like much of supply chain, right? So there's again a trade-off. So I'll again go back. I'll have to, see what needs to be done and then take a call, right? I mean, see, I hope you realize, right? No matter what choice whatever choice I make, right? It's going to be a bit of a downer on one parameter and a bit of a less downer on the other parameter, right? So I'll take a call. There were some concerns. Let's see what comes out of it. I'm generally not a big fan of open book. Not a big fan of exams, to be honest. But then it is what it is, right? So it is pretty much it. For those of you already placed, congratulations. For those of you who are not, all the best. Placements are lined up after some time. So wish you all the best. If you want any, if you think I can be of any help at all, feel free to reach out to me, right? And whatever little I know, I would be happy to share, help out in any way I can. Please do not hesitate, right? Just drop me a message, drop me an email, whatever is comfortable, and we'll set up something and discuss whatever needs to be discussed, right? So it's, as always, it's a pleasure, very different kind of pleasure, to be honest, this time around, right? And kind of drains you completely, no matter how much you try. But all of you made it worth it, and thank you so much, and wish you all the best. Thank you. Right, I'm still here, right? So in case anybody's in campus or come to campus, maybe we can have have a chit chat around that, right? Always a pleasure. I know it's tough for me, but it's even tougher for all of you because I have to do it for one course. You have to do it for all these courses. But it's tough, but then it's good to know that kind of spirit that most of you have shown, right? And please, as I said, at any point of time, if you need anything from my side, please do not hesitate, right? I'm always, whatever I know, what little I understand, I'm more than happy to help you in any way I can, right? It's an absolute pleasure, believe me. This is the high point of my job. Interacting with Brian Bites. Otherwise, what is my job, right? Nothing much, read some papers, write some papers, and that's pretty much it, right? That's the nature of my job. The high point is these classes, which Zoom has tested. Even somebody like me, I thought I am full of, but Zoom has tested my capabilities also. But okay, right? Great. Thanks a lot, everyone. But don't forget to submit, right? I mean, don't forget to submit. Don't forget to names. Those who and put all your names, right? It's very difficult to map later, right? And I mean, it's not difficult. I'm lazy, so that's why I'm pushing the burden to all of you. Right, so take care. Enjoy the day, enjoy the placement season, enjoy the rest of the academic program, and enjoy the rest of your lives. I wish you from the bottom of my heart the most sincerest of thank yous for your engagement and the most sincerest of all the best going forward, right? Wish all of each and all of you the very best. And your bright minds, I'm sure you would do a great job going forward. So thanks a lot, everyone. See you around, hopefully. See you around, hopefully. Right? Great, thanks. Goodbye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was worth the bidding point that we put.
Oh, that is possibly, I mean, even though you are trying to value something, but this was possibly one of the nicest things somebody has said to me post-lockdown, right? So even though you're saying points and but I will take it, right? Beggars are not choosers, I will take it, not a problem. I'll take it. Not to worry.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Ah, great. Thanks.